I definitely love to have security conversations, and something that, like, I've been in tech for a long time, doing security for my career. So I'm glad other people share that same interest, and we can get to talk to people about this stuff.
Yeah, for sure, dude. And look, thanks for coming on. It took us a couple of weeks to get it to, get the right time and to make it happen. But, I assume that, you've got family, I've got family, and we're trying to make everything, fit in. So we made it work. And yeah, thanks for coming on. This is a discussion. I can just talk forever about this stuff. I mean, I can talk with people, because one thing that I find is that no matter how much you know, there's always more to learn, and there's always like corners that you haven't looked into. And I've got a very I consider my understanding quite like very basic when it comes to this stuff, because whoever I listen to, they always have so much more to offer. But I think Jexa might be joining us at some stage this morning as well. I was listening to you and Axis on the way on my drive in, and that was a really good stream. I encourage people to go back and check that out if they haven't. But the other thing I was telling people to go and check out on your channel, RHMax, is your you did like a 5-episode series on security, and that was great. I was like doing my morning walks and listening to those, and I live when you were doing them, and they were really good, mate. They were really good. So props to you for putting out so much material. And yeah, welcome to DeFi Down Under. It's our new channel that we sort of put together not too long ago. And yeah, so
that's awesome.
I sort of, before, when I invited you on, I said, look, what are some practical things that people can do to just increase their security? And I'll sort of put it over to you, and maybe I'll chime in with some different topics if need be.
Yeah, I mean, that's practical is an interesting question on this, because I've really been pushing the don't use Windows type of thing as one of the. I want to say it's easy because it's switching to another operating system, whether it's Mac or Linux, or using it, it's just whatever else is out there. It's a bunch of different distributions of different stuff. But the reason I grew up on Windows, that was my go-to OS for a long time. A lot of my apps were from that too. But the last few years, especially most of my machines, I've just been going away from it, because it is just so easy to get malware on it. And during Security Week, as you mentioned, I did the 5 days, the 5 different topics, and had Ben Dugard on there, and Vince and Papa Boner and other people as well, kind of go through some of the topics too. It was just so, we brought up a bunch of different stats of how, not like 95% of malware in 2022 is made for Windows. And it's like, I've been kind of saying this for a while, of one of the easiest things you can do is don't put yourself at a disadvantage by using an operating system where all the malware people want to attack. They want to go over that one, because that's where most people that's what they're using. That's what most default computers come with. That you can buy a $500, $1,000 computer versus a $2,000 MacBook. Big price difference. People are just going to automatically go there. They've been using it forever. The market share is huge. So that's just where a lot of the bad stuff is going to be when you browse the internet. And that's where a lot of it comes through, as your web browser too. So as far as practical goes, I know a lot of people, there's definitely an angst. I know the transition for me was like, okay, I would still have my Windows computer, and then I would use my Mac for a while and stuff like that. And then, but eventually I was like, I don't want to use Windows anymore. I don't want to be afraid to click on the wrong website. Like, as a security person, like, I feel I can trust myself a lot to, okay, look at the browser, look at the URL, make sure you double check the numbers and the dApps and the contract address and stuff. But even me, I'm like, I don't even want to put myself at a disadvantage in the first place. So if I could just get used to using a beautiful machine like a Mac, why not? It just made sense.
So why is it? Well, the reason the Mac is more secure is because it's locked down. You don't have admin privileges to it. So that rubs a lot of security people the wrong way, right? A lot of security people, they're like, there's no way I'm not having access privileges on my own system, right? But there is a benefit. There is a benefit if you say that, oh, look, I trust the entity that's got the access privileges, there's a benefit to that, right? What's the benefit?
Well, I would just say that, yeah, on Mac, I mean, even on Windows, it's kind of like you have an administrator account, but it's so far abstracted away that that's why when you click on something to do, change some system setting, it asks you for a password because it wants to verify like this is you doing it, and also make you like do an extra step in order to escalate privileges in order to do the operation. But on Mac, it's, I mean, there's the root account, just like on Linux and Mac, there's root account, which is your admin account. But yeah, you are kind of removed away from that, but for a reason, because if someone compromises your computer, then if it's hard for you to do something, it's going to be hard for them, and vice versa. It's easy for you to use your crypto. It's going to be easy for a person to compromise your computer to use crypto. So it's not really that you can't access admin on Mac and Linux, but it's just usually set up in a way by default to make it harder to do and keep you away from it, so that there isn't, any program. If you do install, there's Mac malware, there's Linux malware. If you happen to somehow come across it and install it, or otherwise run it, get on your computer, it's going to make it harder for that to, take over your computer. Versus on Windows, similar concept is trying to make it harder to do, but there's just so much more of it, so much more trickery going on that it ends up happening anyways.
And I feel like one of the there are people who are using Windows, and I would say one of the most basic things, if you absolutely must use Windows for whatever reason, there might be that, you've got a BYOD device, which is bring your own device for your work, and you've just got to use Windows for what they're telling you you've got to use it. One of the things I think that people can do is, rather than using that admin account, which a lot of people, they have their Windows and they're using the admin account to do everything like that login. One of the, I think, most basic and fundamental things that you can do with Windows is set up a user account that doesn't have all the access privileges, and then you use that account. So you are getting that prompt when something wants to get those access privileges. Because if you don't have that prompt, if you're not being prompted to put the password in, then it might just come up with a little box and say, is it okay to install this? And you just click yes. If you're getting that password prompt, at least you're getting this prompt that's saying, hey, this requires a password, which is at least making you think about it.
Take it seriously. Yeah,
exactly. Hang on, let me just bring Jexer up.
Hey guys, how you going? Yeah,
hey Jexer.
Good to have you on, mate. Yeah,
good to see you again. It's been a while. I think I had you on the show last year sometime.
Yeah, it has been a little while. Yeah. I was sort of listening from afar before I joined in. Did you go into your background at all?
Not yet. No. I can if that's if so. Background as far as crypto or security, or what are you guys interested in?
I think your security background, because it'll show people like why you should actually listen to you in the first place. Like that's your core competency in the real world. So
I actually think it's interesting because, apparently, I have controversial opinions on VPNs. I have a very interesting rant on those. I've put on the channel a billion times as well. And yeah, the Windows, a lot of people just don't understand that. Why not Windows? Everyone uses Windows. What are you talking about? So yeah, I think it is good to frame that. If 43 OG don't mind, I'll spend just a couple minutes and be like, hey, this is why I've seen some stuff, right? So yeah, I've been my entire career, even before I had a career, has been in technology and security. I learned to code at a young age, and just went on to security from there. Like just doing different kind of vulnerability analysis and just like looking for holes in systems and figuring out like what makes a computer secure. So I've been doing it from a very young age, and it naturally became a career. So I started working in big tech and various different tech companies and otherwise, for a lot of very big companies, and very different jobs. So jobs from malware. I've been doing like malware analysis before, stuff related to that, to like finding vulnerabilities, to like, okay, we're releasing a product, like we got to find all the bugs, all the issues, all the exploits in it before we release it. So go find those. Like my team, like go find those, and then tell us what they are. Let us fix them, and then we'll ship the product to make it more secure for customers. So, and it's went from cloud to hardware analysis in certain cases, to software side, to web apps and everything in between. So that's part of the professional experience. On the other side, I've navigated the internet for, quite a while as well. And I've came across situations where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've, one other click, and had my browser not been updated, or had I been using Windows, for example, I've been using Linux or Mac or something, had I went one step further by going down this rabbit hole, which is a web browser, which basically lets other people run things on your computer in just a very supposedly isolated way, but there's all kinds of holes. That's why they get exploited all the time. So I've seen so many situations where I'm like, okay, how can I avoid that? Like, being a person who, has did this for a living for a long time, I've developed all these habits that make me very cautious, very wary, and I want a secure by default type of environment when I'm browsing the internet, because I don't want to get compromised either. So that has informed me of all these different ideals and methods and ways of thinking about things that I think is unique in security almost. I don't know. I feel like, I ask people about VPNs, I ask the security people, hey, do you use a VPN at home? They're like, no, like, what are you talking about? I'm like, that's what I thought, right? Why would I do that? And that informs, kind of like my stuff on that. And then on Windows, it's just kind of that's because every time I go, going for Christmas, fix family's computer, come back next year, it's all messed up again. If they had a Mac, or maybe if I get my iPad or something, they can't mess it up quite as bad, or at least, lose all their, at least not get hacked. At least they're just, bricking the device, which is, I guess better in a way.
So you think that's more of a user issue, and I think the Macs tend to cater for people that are probably less tech savvy. Would that be? Actually,
a lot of things that made Windows so it's interesting too to have I have an interesting relationship with Windows as far as as a power user. It's very annoying because there's so many security things that are in the way that make a marginal difference, but make everyone else's life harder. And then again, you come back the next year, nothing works. There's some Trojan running in the background every single year. It's insane. So it's like Microsoft has tried to have world-class engineers. They have a lot of world-class security people working there too. And they've tried to make this easier and better. But what has happened is, since Windows 8, for example, I'll just take a little tangent because I have a little bit historical on this. They've put so much plumbing, so much telemetry, so much stuff into the operating system to make it inform Windows Defender, which is, anyone asks me what kind of, I don't want, there's another controversial thing is like, what kind of antivirus should I run on Windows? The answer is none. Yeah, none. It only has Windows Defender, right? Like, to me, it's just, it's common sense, but everyone's like, oh, malware. A lot of people like Malwarebytes. They like Norton. They like all their favorite from years and years, nostalgia. But anyways, I'll put that aside. That's another little piece that's I've been informed over the years as well. But anyways, since Windows 8, things have changed a lot, and they tried to improve security, but it's still so hard to do when you have every malware writer in the world targeting that one operating system. When it's got the most market share, it should be. If you want to make the most money, you don't fish in the pond that has 3 fish, you fish in the one that's got 3,000. So they're just, it's incentives being aligned, and it's a tough race. Software's hard, security's hard, all that stuff. But I think that's been a major reason that a lot of people get compromised. They run, either they basically just downloading and running software in some way. They either get you to do it, they call you, they text you, they message you, they pretend to be someone else. You go to a website, automatically installs it. One way or another, code that is not what you wanted to run on your computer gets ran, and then your money gets gone or gets compromised or something like that. So removing yourself, that's why, again, Windows, you put yourself on Mac, the Windows exploit fails. It's not for Mac. Some of them are more universal than others, but most of the time it's targeting very specific things and the most people. So anyways, I hope that I said a lot of things, but I try to put that together to inform a lot of my positions on things too, and not just make it like I'm just contrarian. I'm contrarian in a way, but I'm also I also have a lot of experience with it.
I think we should circle back to the things on VPNs and just maybe finish up this thread on OSs. You were talking about Mac. How is it easy to do crypto on Macs? Like, is it easy to get your software conduit wallets or extensions on there? Is it easy for do your hardware wallets function? Because one of the things that I noticed with Linux is that if you don't know where to put, there are some udev files that you need to go and put in the in certain places. If you don't not putting them there, I couldn't get it to work without that. And then you have to go on this search to online to work out how to do all of that. is it easier on Mac to get all your hardware wallets to function?
I wouldn't say it's easier. I don't think, and Jex or anyone in the chat, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's a lot of problems supporting hardware wallets in particular. And as far as browsers go, you can use Chrome, you can use Firefox, whatever, you install MetaMask, it all works the same. So I don't know. I can't think of it. I won't say it makes it easier using that, but I wouldn't say that I don't see anything that makes it harder. I haven't came across it at least. But Jex, do you have any experience, Jex, running stuff on Mac?
Yeah, no, I've helped a lot of clients in my in real life job, and a lot of those guys are older and they run Macs, and I never have any issues. Like the one thing I do notice is if I'm doing remote support with these guys, it is harder for me to do remote support because the Mac OS is locked down a lot more, and they have to give a lot of permissions for those sorts of programs to work. So it is geared up to be more, I guess, more protective of the user. And I'm not a Mac person. I'm debating whether I make the switch. But the thing that held me back from that for so long was just the lock-in with the Mac products and things like that. But I think that's changed a little bit now. Like you can run most things, like all the main Office software that you'd run normally on a Windows. You can all do that now, and I think it's a lot of those issues that held me back have probably been resolved now. I would think that they're a little bit more flexible in the way they do things. I still don't like a lot of the lock-in they do on a few things, and I still come across that. So I think the devil's always in the detail. It's not until you're really deep in using something you go, oh, shit, it doesn't have that, or I can't do that. And that's where that's my stumbling block on the OS side with that. But I totally agree with you. I think from the ground up, it's probably been built better. I think the underlying code base is Unix on Macs. Is that correct? I believe.
Yeah, it's Darwin. It's using a Darwin kernel, which is actually open source, a lot of parts of it. So, but it's a POSIX type operating system, which means it's like compatible against different Unixes, which is Linux, and yeah, you could throw Mac in there as well. Much more similar to Linux than it is Windows. Say that.
And so that's one of the massive pros for it, because like 90% of the internet runs on Linux, and that's sort of the breed where this comes from. Whereas Microsoft took a totally different approach and have had to, I guess, build a few things into shape to get those features. And now they're just porting in like Linux subsystem into Windows and things like that, which is cool, but it is a bit clunky. So.
Yeah, and fun fact: Windows's data center, their cloud, their cloud system, Azure, mostly runs Linux. Like you said, that Linux is runs the internet. It runs pretty much everything. So if you want to run a server, people ask me, run a validator on Windows. I'm like, I guess you can, but I don't know who's going to support that. I don't have any scripts on Windows. And then like back up a question: why would you even want to do that? Like Windows is, there's Windows Server. There's a big market share for that. Blah blah blah. But in general, for the average person, you run a server, it's Linux. You run a server in the cloud, it's Linux-based server.
I haven't tried running a validator on Windows. I wanted to give it a go just to see how easy it would be, because I think now you probably could get away with it. But yeah, why would you? It's just so easy to run a Linux one.
Yeah, for sure. It's good. I think learning Linux, that's the biggest. I had a tweet about this too for people who aren't familiar with Linux and they really want to run validators. There's got to be some basics there. Like if you don't know the basics of command line or how to, clone a GitHub repo, like how to download the software to get it running, it's going to be a struggle. You're going to be the person in the chat who just keeps banging the head on the keyboard and asking themselves, why am I doing this to myself? If you're gonna get into that, try to take some course or some online training or otherwise to get at least a little bit familiar. I think it's worth it though. It's one of those skills that Linux isn't going away. It has staying power. I do believe.
And all that stuff to do with Linux, it's freely available on YouTube. You'll find some basic tutorials on how to do all that command line stuff. Just all the basic stuff. You can download a PDF of a cheat sheet with all the most used commands and all that stuff. It's not as maybe it can get quite complicated, but the basic stuff is not that complicated, I don't think. Do you use which OS do you think is you know, ideal for people to start off on if they're going to move over to Linux?
Guess for me or Jackson?
Both. You first, RH.
For moving over to Linux, well, I would say Mac is, I don't know. I mean, my first reaction is Mac, but because it's closest to it. But then, really, I think it depends. If you're going to use Linux, you don't have to. If you're a desktop user, you don't have to use the command line on a day-to-day basis. You barely have to use it at all. Like they have GUIs. It looks, you know, a lot of stuff looks and kind of feels like Windows, just like a different way of clicking on it and all that stuff. So I don't know. I think I went from Windows to Linux. I mean, I did it extremely early. Linux was like barely around back then, but that transition for me, I didn't need a Mac. I didn't actually start using Mac until a few years ago, because it's kind of like, to me, it's kind of the middle ground. Like there's, it's nice, it's shiny, it's, you know, I like the way it looks, and also it feels more like Windows than Linux does. So yeah, going to Linux, I would say it's okay to go from Windows. It's okay to go from Mac. If you use Mac before, you probably use more command line than you have on Windows. So maybe that's more comfortable for you. But I think I don't even think about like how to transition, or like which one you've used before makes a better transition. It's more of, do you have the time? Do you have the patience? Do you have two computers? Like the best way to do it to me is don't like just swap. Like have, you know, if you're going to get a Mac, for example, you have your Windows computer, pick up a MacBook or iMac or whatever you want, and then just kind of use it for a while. Like make yourself use it, put some program or app on it. You like put Telegram on it, put, you know, something where it's going to make you use it a little bit at a time to get used to it. And then eventually a little bit at a time, go from, okay, I'm using it once or twice a week. I'm only answering messages. Now I'm doing email on it. Now I'm doing streams on it. Like that kind of thing, that kind of transition, rather than which one you're coming from. I think that's more helpful.
I found that Ubuntu was a pretty user-friendly GUI for most people coming from Windows, because, you know, I think that, you know, as far as you know, the browser usability is pretty much exactly the same. Have you done much crypto stuff on Linux desktops? Like, have you found that pretty easy?
As far as, yeah, as far as, I mean, there really is, if you're doing stuff in browser, I think, so I'll say it like this, there's a difference when you're doing stuff with browser, with MetaMask and all that, versus if you're running crypto apps or wallets or other stuff like that. So there may be certain apps you run, regardless of what they are, whether they're, I don't know, I think there are Linux apps for hardware wallets. I'm pretty sure they are. I know this, you know, Windows and Mac specifically, but yeah, Jexia, is there apps for Linux, for Trezor and all that stuff?
For Trezor, there's some support. Yeah. I've never used it, so I couldn't comment on how it is. But the way they've seemed to do everything is that you can't tell the difference between the web and the actual app that you put in. Okay. So whatever framework they've used seems to be, they've kept the UI and the UX pretty similar across all of it. Yeah,
it's probably Electron. Probably Electron or some kind of framework like that that's cross-platform. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, that's why I haven't even thought about it as much. I'm like, oh yeah, I think that, you know, they're pretty universal support. Anyways, most of the thing that people are going to be using though is like the in-browser stuff. Like they're going to be talking to dApps and using MetaMask and all this stuff. So with that, you know, as long as your browser supports it, as long as you can install the whatever extensions or talk to whatever dApps, you know, whether you're using Linux or using Mac or Windows, it doesn't really matter as long as your browser supports it. So that's more of a browser thing than it is operating system thing. So I wouldn't think anyone, I've never had problems, you know, talking to dApps and stuff using Linux, you know, on Firefox, Chrome, whatever it is.
When I went over to Linux, with hardware wallets, I had trouble like getting them to work, and I had to install the UDEV rules for Trezor and for Ledger. And until I did that, there was just no way that my hardware wallets were connecting to the wallets, the soft wallets.
That is one thing that Linux, I would say that's one thing that Linux has struggled with. It's hardware, not hardware support, but hardware, you know, certain drivers, if they're open source, not open source, sometimes you got to download them. Sometimes they work from the Ubuntu store. Sometimes you got to open up for the third-party drivers. or you got to do some special command, UDEV rules, like messing with the hardware, the USB settings, stuff like that. But usually there's some kind of workaround, especially for hardware wallets. Like you said, it sounds like you were having problems, and then you followed the command to update the settings and stuff, and then it worked from there. Is that right?
You're on mute.
I had to go to the GitHub and download the UDEV rules for Trezor. It's like a file, and then the UDEV rules for Ledger, and then I had to go put them in the ext/UDEV folder.
Yeah.
There's a folder, and I had to go put them in there, and when I put them in there, then it just works.
I feel like there should be a script for that already, but okay.
Yeah, but
I think
might be a script somewhere.
I think that's the thing with the Linux flavors. If you're heading down that path, like it's a great journey, but the learning curve is pretty steep if you've never done that kind of thing before, and you're down and dirty with the OS, so you're very close to the operating system. Whereas on the more graphical type OSs, you're abstracted from that a little bit more. So you've just got to be prepared to get a little bit grubby if you're going to go down the Linux path, I think.
I want to ask about VM OSs for security. What are your thoughts, RHMax?
Like using virtual machines?
Yeah, as a way of so the benefit. I'll just preface it with this. The benefit, in my opinion, of using a virtual machine is that at the end of using it, I mean, you can do what you like. At the end of using it, you can just burn it and then have used a snapshot copy to start it up again, and then you have a clean OS. And that's the beauty of what a VM will allow you to do. Have you ever used VMs or to do crypto stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I used to, back in the day, when I first got into it, 2016, 2017, that's kind of what you did or that's what, security minded people did. I guess I would say that is you don't just download all the wallets and put them in your computer. For me, for example, I would have servers or other computers or otherwise where I had virtual machine software. And then I would, like you said, take a snapshot. Snapshot's just like, okay, like a current state of all the things going on. You maybe install a clean version of Windows, whatever it is. You have a snapshot. You say, okay, I can always roll back and I can always go back to this like nothing ever happened. Like burn the rest of it, and then you can install whatever wallets you want. And if you do happen to download something malicious or a Trojan or something that goes wrong, then you can just say, okay, this is bad. I can burn it. I can reset, go back to the real one, and you isolate it away from all your other computers. You should probably put on another network. That's another way to segment it so it doesn't try to talk to your other computers if it is really that bad. And then also have multiple virtual machines. Like have, a lot of people, they'd have like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 clean version of Windows you install stuff on and then run it. And then they're all isolated from each other. And it's kind of hard, especially back then. It was like you would run stuff. They had staking, which was just basically like you run a wallet and it's using like, CPU cycles or whatever to just earn more coins. And there's a whole bunch of different stuff that may take a lot of resources. So you would kind of need to have multiple ones running at the same time, which was great for isolation. So the biggest advantage for that, is like you can rinse, repeat, you can install stuff on a isolated computer, which is the VM. It's like a baby computer within a computer and not affect your real stuff and not get, your own stuff compromised. So VMs are a game changer. I think the biggest thing to overcome for people is one, to understand that you can have a computer inside a computer. You can have it's like a web browser window, but it's a computer. Like I know that's like I've been in tech forever. To me, it's obvious and like a day-to-day thing I would use at work and stuff too. But for a person who's just like, hey, I just want to run this wallet without, it affecting the rest of my stuff, it is kind of this like mind-bending thing of like, oh no, that's another computer. I know it's another window, but it's actually another computer too. So once you wrap your head around that and then use the software, some of it's paid, some of it's free and open source. It's a game changer, but not a lot of people take advantage of it, unfortunately.
So as far as VM OSs go, are there any that you can suggest for people? I mean, I know off the top of my head, I know there's things like cubes, which really is, I've found that's kind of difficult to use on a day-to-day basis. It's like, but the other one I've used is Hunix, which is like, Tor, like it's based around using Tor, and it gives you a gateway so that you've got that first Tor hop is going through, like you've got a VM, like a workstation VM, and then you've got a gateway, and the first Tor hop goes through the gateway, so that I guess that gives you a little bit more security. At least you can have a bit more faith in that first hop, you know, that you're going out through Tor. But have you used any of these, like which operating systems, VM operating systems have you used, or has it just been through like Mac and Windows and Linux?
Well, I dropped a couple in the chat. The software that I've used before, which is VirtualBox,
and VMware,
which is the free one. Oracle, it was open source. I think Oracle bought it or took it over or something at some point. But that's the one that everyone uses for demos because it's free and you can download it and run stuff. And then VMware, if you are more of like a power user, you want like all the nice, like super fast snapshot features and stuff like that, you can use a VMware Workstation or vSphere if you want to actually install it on if you have your own server and you can run, you know, remotely dial into it, spin up new virtual machines, have all that stuff. But those two have been, at least in the industry, like the go-tos as far as the free one and the paid one goes, what I have the most experience with. And like that versus Docker, you have like, you know, Docker's really popular these days for dev environments. It's like a baby virtual machine, although it's like packaged as a file. And it's like a horrible way to explain it for anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, but it's think of like less hardware isolation and less of that versus just like a repeatable image that you can go put on a validator, or you can go spin up some web server that is open source or otherwise. So virtual machines and Docker container software are different, but they can function in a lot of similar ways. So if you're familiar with Docker and use that, you know, using virtual machines, there's a lot of overlapping concepts at least.
And if you're looking for a freeware version like VM for Linux, you can use KVM, which is you know, another option there for you. And maybe I believe it's open source and not proprietary software. So you know, that's a big plus, I would say as well. We've been talking about VMs. Why don't we pivot into the whole? Sorry, Jexa, you go.
Can we just? So there was a question in the chat which I think is relevant, just to probably tie this off. So Jay's said, "Great discussion. Question: dual boot Linux Windows. Where are the risks in that environment? Because before virtual machines, we used to do a lot of dual booting because that gave you access to two different types of operating systems. What's your opinion on that now? Has that sort of gone by the wayside with the virtualization?"
I talked about this on Security Week. It came up too. It's a good question. So because people are talking about, you know, if they want to try Linux, you can dual boot. Yeah, you can do that these days. To me, dual booting was always, you know, I don't want to have another computer, or I don't want to buy another computer type of thing. So I don't know what people's setups are. Like for me, you know, I have miscellaneous computers here and there, you know, around the office and stuff, laptops, desktops, things like that. So if you have, you know, spare hardware and you have another workstation where you want to use this stuff, or if you're just setting up as a server, you know, Linux, you can just, you know, plug it in and just remotely dial into it through SSH or other remote management stuff. I think I would just, in the modern day where computers are cheap and, you know, all that stuff, I would just get another computer and install it. But because dual boot, you can only use one at a time. That's the drawback. It's like, yeah, you can have both operating systems, but you got to reboot to get on the other one. And it's like, it was just one of those things that was really good back in the day, but now the computers are much cheaper than they used to be and around and commoditized. I think just having a spare computer to install Linux on is the way I would go for it.
Yep, agreed.
If you want a blank slate of an operating system, you can that's not using the hard drive of the system you're on. You can boot into. I'm just trying to think of what the OS is. I use it all the time, but I can't even remember the name of it. It's Linux based, and it's just they call it the Amnesia OS. I'm just forgetting.
Tails one. Is that what?
Tails, yeah, Tails. That's it. I find that's a good option if you ever need to, you know, jump on and just have something that's not going to remember anything. It's not going to touch your hard drive. It's just going to use the you know, the RAM and the drive that you're booting from, which, you know, can be a thumb drive.
It's a great point. I think booting from a live OS. So, for example, you know, with Ubuntu, you can download the image. When you boot from it, whether USB or CD or whatever you're using, you can select, you know, install or like run the live OS. I say live CD because it's the last 20 years. I remember live CD stuff. When CDs were a thing, when you boot from a CD, right?
Yeah.
So the live mode will allow you to, just like you said, not touching any of your actual hardware, just keeping everything in memory. And that's a great way, for example, if you want to generate seed words. Or like I'm thinking of validator seed words, but I'm sure you can do any type of secret that you want to burn immediately when you eject it. That's a great way to do it too through the live OS. So it's a great point.
Yeah, I think if you can even use tools like the Ian Coleman tool. You save the HTML of that in a persistent storage on Tails. Like Tails allows you to have persistent storage on there. You can save that HTML in there and then open it up in a browser in Tails and then do what you need to do. Look, there's some very, very fringe case, you know, security issues with that, I think, but they're very, very fringe. And I think you really need to be a targeted, you know, very much targeted individual for that to, it needs to almost be like evil maid type attack where someone's like got access to your hardware, you know, somehow. And yeah, I think I've heard people say that be careful about that stuff, but I think for everyday people, your biggest problem is probably the $5 wrench attack before that type of thing.
So I always discuss the security spectrum, and you've got to understand what you're trying to protect against and what you're actually trying to protect. So if you're trying to protect $5 worth of crypto, well, how far do you go? But if you're trying to protect the crypto of a company or something like that, where you've got a big treasury, then you obviously need to take things a lot more seriously. So I think you've just got to find that, I look at it as like a balancing point between convenience and security, and you've got to find that balance point that suits your current situation. And then as things change, you evolve that process based on how that model changes for you. Yeah,
it's definitely something I tried to get away from. I guess later in my career, I was like, earlier on, I was like, oh, max security, I can figure this out. Like I can make it the most secure. I'll be Googling like, how can I do this exactly? I want to get this perfect permission set up. But nowadays I'm like, but for what? Like, what am I actually protecting? Like, what am I risking forgetting or losing or having to keep up with or spending my time on? Like, is the ROI actually there? So yeah, that's why I say when people say, oh, I want the maximum security possible, I'm thinking, are you sure? Because like you said, are you a company's treasury, or are you just, $500 of crypto? Like, it's not about not taking it seriously, but it's just about, not making it too hard on yourself, especially depending on what you're trying to protect in the first place.
Yeah. Everything has a
really good point.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. Everything has a.
You go, mate. We've got a bit of a delay. We're on a different side of the country. We're about 4-hour flight away from each other. So, I was just going to say, that's a good point. And how like an example of that is the difference between Jexa and I, how we handle like password managers, for example. Jexa, you're like very much, you want the convenience of that, an online type, password manager, whereas I'm very much, my password manager is like KeyPass, offline, because I just don't want to give that trust to any level of trust to any online third party, for example. That's just me, right? But
I'm on team 43OG on that one. I cannot do cloud-based password managers. I can't.
Yeah, and it depends what you're storing as well. So there's some things I'll store on one and not the other, and or I won't store it all on any sort of software. So it just depends what info you're trying to store.
It is annoying, I'll say, especially when you do offline ones. It's like, okay, now you got to worry about backing it up. You got to worry about losing your master password. You got to worry about all these things. But at the same time, it's like, you've seen cloud providers who do password stuff. Your one job is to protect the passwords, and they get compromised sometimes. And so that's just them getting compromised. What if they are, you know, not as, what if they're looking at your stuff and like what they say, oh, it's encrypted except when it goes to us, just in case, you know, legal reasons. Like it's a lot of complications, but yes, depending on what you're protecting. I agree with Jackson.
Well, that's an interesting point, because the UK have just passed a law in relation to this, which is it's just sort of floated in, and it's hard to believe that this stuff is going on. It's always under the guise of, it's always for the reason of, we need to protect you guys. We're doing it for you. We need to protect you. But ultimately, I believe that they want to be able to access encrypted data of users, not just UK citizens, anyone in the world. They want to be able to access the user data, encrypted user data of anyone in the world that's interacted with a UK citizen. So that is you know, that's sort of the direction we seem to be going in. And if you've got like, you know, companies, you know, big companies like Facebook and Google, who are going to have that access to your data, you really have to consider whether your data is really private or whether it's just, you know, encrypted in transit.
Yeah, and I think that thing you're specifically talking about, and I've got to be honest, I haven't read in the detail of it, but they're aiming it at social media platforms and being able to police or what is it, cancel these days. So they basically want to be able to control the narrative on social media platforms is the reason why they're bringing that in. But yeah, it could easily extend to not allowed to use, encryption becomes illegal. Now, I don't think that's ever going to be the case, especially for private citizens. They can't stop you from using some form of encryption to protect your information, which you should do. So if you've got important information, you should be encrypting it yourself, not relying on a company to, when they say, oh, we encrypted at rest or whatever. Like if you've got really important data, you encrypt it before you put it on one of those services if you want to really look after it.
So just as a practical measure, that if someone wants to have an offline password manager, you can use a Tails OS. The Tails OS has a persistent storage option, which is password protected. And then it comes with the KeePass password manager program, which is also password protected. So you can do that sort of thing. And then the beauty of Tails is that you can make a clone of your Tails and then back up the encrypted storage component of it quite easily. That's a very very easy thing to do. So you load into a Tails OS, and then it's just a backup persistent storage. And then if you've got another Tails OS, you just plug that in and it will back up that persistent storage to the second Tails. So you can have a clone of your passwords, offline passwords, quite easily. It's more hassle than doing the you know, the online stuff. The online stuff is definitely more convenience, but you know, inconvenience is a part of the trade-off we have when we're looking at security. You know, higher levels of security.
Yeah, it's always and just to go back to the point of, like, you know, encryption or government snooping and stuff like that, strong encryption is privacy. Like that's the only way we really can have it. Weak encryption is kind of like that. That was a game when, you know, I think, what did they try to, that's when the thing came out, the code to speech. Was that from the crypto case? They were trying to put both, they were trying to say you can't have strong crypto, and then also trying to put backdoors in hardware and all this stuff happening in the 90s and all that. A lot of that came out from, okay, you can have crypto, but you know, it's got to be weaker. It can't be as strong, because then we can break it, because then the whole thing's a race. The whole thing is like, the only reason crypto works is because it takes too much power and too much energy and too much time to crack the code, if you will, then it's worth doing. So if it takes 1 million years for the government to crack the crypto you're using, like, they're not going to bother. If it takes, you know, 30 days or 30 seconds, that's a different story. So having strong crypto available is how we maintain our privacy. It's our self-sovereignty. It is essential. And there's a lot of tech companies out there who, either they say end to end, or maybe they're honest about it, maybe they're not. But one way or another, the government, they prefer that not to happen. So don't be surprised if it doesn't happen as fast as it could, because you know, maybe there's other stuff going on trying to slow it down, because, you know, that's how they solve crimes, right? You know, what have you got to hide? What have you got to hide? So.
Yeah. And that's always the argument, isn't it? If you've got nothing to hide, then why do you need, well, I mean, you know, how about every state actor trying to spy on us? How about that? Is that enough? Like, you know, I think that's probably.
You can't be a free person if someone's watching you. Like watching something getting watched changes its behavior. That's like a scientific thing anyway. So it's like, you know, an act of a free person is like not having to look over the shoulder and think, oh, did I do something wrong today? I think as long as we got that, as imperfect as, you know, governments are around the world, I don't know. I think I don't want to get into a philosophical conversation around it, but we're not there yet, thankfully.
Yeah. I did mention just in the intro that you know, we're pretty lucky. We're in Australia. I believe you're in the US, and we're pretty free. We're you know, for the most part, we're pretty free. But there are countries out there that are not as free and have a different standard, and you can get thrown in a cage. So that's where privacy and security is really so much more important. And so when we talk about what we could do, a lot of the time we're talking about from our perspective in our country. But imagine that it's illegal to do certain things in another country, which, you know, we would deem as human rights, being able to send someone a message or whatever. You know, in other countries, you might need that high level of end-to-end encryption to allow you to do that without the possibility of someone snooping on it in, you know, and that's, I mean, for example, WhatsApp, for example, it says end-to-end encrypted, right? End-to-end encrypted, but they have the key. Yeah, it's end-to-end encrypted, but they have the keys, so they can access it if they need to. So, you know, you got to ask yourself, you know, the question, whether that's, you know, whether that's something you really want to use. Maybe for regular discussions, but if it's something that, you know, more
so
security
can we just out of all the messaging platforms, what's your go-to at the moment?
Signal.
For Signal, yeah. Now I don't know whether they've changed recently and they've weakened their security posture. I know they were getting a bit of heat about it, but at the moment, if you've got to discuss anything sensitive, that's where you should be doing it. That's the best we've got, I think, at the moment, other than something that's probably
with the existence of Pegasus, and you know, I'm sure they're not looking at us, but look, this is one thing we could understand, that we're going into a time where maybe previously it was not possible for everyone to get surveilled, but with something like Pegasus, which can, you know, is a 0-day type, you know, access to your device, and AI to be able to monitor multiple, like we don't know what sort of, where we're going, where this is going as far as surveillance, the surveillance state. We just don't know where it's going to go. I mean, I can imagine that with enough computing power, and Pegasus deployed on everyone's phone, everyone can get surveilled by any country in the world with access to that software and AI. I would have thought that is just a natural progression of surveillance, you know? So you can only really be truly secure in a discussion with someone if there's no devices around. I would have thought.
Well, what's interesting is I just stumbled across a video yesterday on YouTube. So I'll dig out the name in a minute and put it in the chat. But it's about a guy who he originally cracked open the Xbox. So the Xbox was shipped and it had a special chip on it, and it sort of obfuscated the codes to the ROM. And he figured out how to break it down and posted it online. So long story short, this guy's he's all about privacy and security, and everyone's right to have a trusted environment from hardware and software that they know can be verified and there's no backdoors and things like that. He's actually building a phone. What was it called? I'll dig it all out and I'll put it in chat. The phone looks pretty clunky and everything, but the way they're doing it is very unique, where they publish all the schematics of how it's built and the software and everything. So I really hope that there'll be phones that are the mainstream, but if you want that sort of level of privacy and security, hopefully there's going to be a movement that protects that. But I'll dig that video out because it's worth a watch. It was really interesting.
What about Graphene OS? Have you guys heard of that for phones? Which is actually can only be you can only load that onto, I think, Pixel hardware.
Yeah, that's pretty limited at the moment, isn't it?
But I think that's by design. It's limited by design. They know the hardware they're working with, and that's actually to limit. They can lock it down harder, knowing that, and that's where problems can arise if things are deployed on different hardware that hasn't been tested from every angle. So have you guys had any experience with Graphene OS at all?
I haven't, simply because I wanted to put it on a phone and run it and see how it worked, but I didn't have the correct hardware that I could do it from, so I sort of stopped at that point. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth looking at for sure.
Yeah, I haven't yet either, although I do have a spare phone that I'm thinking that I've been kind of, maybe this conversation will propel me to do it. I've been like looking for some motivation to try it out, but I don't know. When I think about phones and stuff, it's more of, I almost think OPSEC is like one of the most important things on your mobile. It's there's always going to be 0 days. There's always going to be exploits. There's always going to be the carrier trying to spy on you, or Google trying to spy on you, or somebody who's trying to get your data one way or another. But the thing that I worry about the most, that I try to avoid, that I take precautions to avoid, is just someone getting access to it. And then maybe they guess the PIN code, maybe they guess or they bypass the fingerprint, maybe they bypass like whatever authentication method you got on there. And then what's on your phone? Well, most everything you do throughout your day. So, and maybe access to other things as well. So I think OPSEC for your phone is one of the most underrated things, versus worrying about what software is on it. But I mean, Graphene definitely, if it becomes popular and supported and more able to support other devices and stuff, I think it could be a game changer. But I don't know. I think I worry about OPSEC on phones more than anything else right now.
So crypto on phones, yes or no?
No, not for me.
Yeah,
I want to support anyone building crypto apps, but I don't mix crypto and phone.
Yeah,
I was having a chat to someone on the Spaces maybe 6 months ago, and he was swearing black and blue that like you can't trust regular OSs anymore, and the Graphene OS, he only does crypto on Graphene OS now through all the options that you've got through that, because it's so locked down. But I say that as he that's what he told me. I haven't looked into it, whether that is, whether I agree with it or not. But it's interesting that his argument was, this has been so locked down and you've got so much control, and you can, you can packet sniff everything and see what's going on. That, it's really, the chances of there being a 0-day attack on that is much less than just other regular.
No, that's probably a different story if it's something that's specifically developed and it's hardened more specifically, and you know how to use it. That's the most important thing. You know how to use these things. Then that's probably a different story. But I can't comment on it because I've never done it. But in general, on the phones that 99% of people have in their pockets today, either Android or iOS, I wouldn't be doing anything serious on it. And from the point, even just simple things where these days you take a snapshot of something, like a screenshot, or you type something on your keyboard, and your keyboard's sending information to servers because they want to do predictive text and things like that. So what do you put in that keyboard, and what's getting collected on the other end? So you just got to be really, really careful with things like that.
I would just start on that. I would start with, what am I protecting against? Because if I'm replacing the OS, am I afraid that I'm going to get hit by an exploit or a 0-day or like, I would say, what am I protecting against? Because you replace the OS and then you still use Coinbase or somebody for transactions. Well, then they can still trace your transactions on the crypto on your phone, the wallet you're using. So I would say, like, am I looking for privacy? Am I looking to not lose my funds? Am I like, that's how I would think about before I build a model for which pieces of my crypto puzzle am I putting together in a certain way to avoid certain attacks or certain things I value. Because if you put in it, if you're just okay, this is better for security, this is better for privacy, but then you don't follow all the way through the entire vertical, it's kind of like just more of a good feeling than like, really making a difference. Not saying I can't speak to this specific example, just saying in general, I see people doing that. I don't want the max security for this. This is, again, Jackson, protecting $5 with a crypto. Just think through the whole model before you take, major steps like that. That's what I would say.
Yeah. And I think that
makes sense. Yeah.
You've touched on this before, RH. This is, no matter what you do, 99% of things that go wrong or people that lose funds is not because the operating system they've chosen or the VPN they're using. It's because they've clicked on something stupid that they shouldn't have done. Because most of these attacks are, these days, they're socially engineered in some way, shape or form, whether it's phishing or someone sends you to a DApp or something like that. Because the systems are pretty good at stopping the transmission of what we used to have a lot of viruses and worms and things like that. That was a known thing, and we've sort of locked those down a lot more with individual firewalls on machines and just the basic virus protection like Defender and all that stops most of the worms and viruses. They're a thing of past days, really, and there's the odd exception. Most of it is user error these days. It's phishing and social engineering.
And if anyone has ever read the book The Art of Deception by the late Kevin Mitnick, who passed away a couple of months ago.
He passed away? Holy crap. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he passed away like in the last couple of months.
Wow.
Yeah, if anyone's read that book,
Legend.
You'll understand how, absolute legend. You'll understand how like much social engineering has to do with people getting scammed in not just with computers, but just in just everyday life, any situation. It's got more to do with just the social side of things than it does to do with what we've been talking about, which is, on a more technical level. We didn't get a chance today to talk about VPNs and proxies. Maybe that's something we can do another time.
Yeah. Let's have another conversation. I think there's a few things we can go down, and even on my blog, there's a whole bunch of, I've like protecting yourselves against malicious smart contracts. We didn't talk about dApps or anything where, if you go to a website, unless they're using a browser exploit, you can't go to a website and just steal your money. That's not how it works. You have to click some buttons, just like Jax was talking about. You have to click the link. You have to click the buttons. You have to approve transactions. Unless, of course, it's a browser exploit, then they need to get on your computer and then, somehow trick you from there. Anyways, there's a ton of stuff we can talk about around that next time too.
IPFS, maybe other ways of maybe not having to use, hosted websites to, by third parties. Something maybe we can talk about as well. But look, thank you very much, RHMax, for coming on. We appreciate your knowledge and the time that you've taken to come on our channel. Is there any last words you want to say before we wind it up?
I'll circle back. If you're looking in the mood for a new computer, MacBooks are looking awful tasty right now. If you like security, I'll go with that. Nice, and they're beautiful too. I like Macs.
You're starting to. I've never used a Mac, but you're starting to make me want to get.
They're cool. Hey, you can refurbish one for $500,000. You don't have to spend $2 or $3 grand. You can get a used one for pretty good, and they last forever too. They're literally a quality product, just like iPhones.
Yeah, we're going off on a tangent again, but I think their new chip that's the thing that's sort of making me want to look at them.
Yeah, the M1 is super, super fast. Yeah. I have one with M1. It's amazing. So yes, you are correct. Your assumption is good on that.
Jexter, any last words?
Yeah, same thing I always preach. It comes down to you. It doesn't matter what you're putting on your operating systems or whatever. It always comes back to you. So protect yourself from your own stupid self. And that's just doing the basics, getting your seed words safe for all things crypto and not ever storing them digitally. And just, don't just randomly click on things. Most programs throw up a message. They want you to read that message. Read the goddamn message.
And I'll just say, always before you go to the new the new website with the new functionality, you know, maybe go have a look at what, you know, people that you know and trust are saying about it first, before you just, you know, if you don't know, don't be the beta tester. Don't be the alpha tester, you know? So yeah, thanks a lot, guys. And thanks to everyone in the chat for coming along. Hopefully we get a chance to do something like this again soon. So yeah.
That's good. Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
Awesome, mate. Cheers. See you later, guys.
Yeah.